My next-door neighbor's older sibling, Jake, was once a piano genius. By the age of 15, he had amassed numerous accolades. However, everything changed when he crossed paths with my classmate Mia. One day, Mia perched herself on his cherished piano, planting a kiss on him with a playful laugh. Jake even dropped out of school for her, accidentally damaged his piano, and began to spiral downward. Frustrated, I reported their relationship to his parents, leading Jake to be compelled to study overseas. Eventually, Jake rose to fame, becoming a luminary in the entertainment industry. I secured a position at his company as a trainee. Without glancing up, he pointed in my direction and instructed me to choose Mia. That evening, I got drunk, and my manager sent me to the offices of prominent investors. Jake stood at the doorway, biting his cigarette with a faint grin. "Guess this is my way of thanking you for tattling back then," he remarked. I was utterly humiliated on that chilly winter night. When I regained consciousness, I found myself back before everything had unfolded. "You felt great bringing someone like Jake down from his pedestal, didn't you? His lips were so thin, I wonder what his kisses were like," teased my deskmate, leaning on her hand. Across the yard by the floor-to-ceiling window sat a tall figure. It was 18-year-old Jake. I jolted back, clutching my chest and gasping for air. Next to me was Mia. In my previous life, Mia had leaned on her hand, staring flirtatiously at Jake as if determined to win him over. I thought she was just boasting until that night I saw her on Jake's piano, kissing him with her head bowed. Now, back in time before everything went downhill, I tried to stay composed and shut the window. "I'm going to study. If you're free, go home, okay?" Mia pouted. "Aren't you curious? Don't you have a crush on him?" I stiffened abruptly. At 17, I made two critical mistakes. First, I had feelings for Jake, but lacked the courage to express them. Second, I exposed his early romance with Mia. As a result, he harbored a grudge against me for 6 years, even sabotaging me as revenge for my betrayal. Recalling that desperate winter night from my past life, I clenched my fists, biting my lip until it bled. "No, I never had a crush on him," I responded calmly. Mia smirked mischievously, curling her lips. "Great. Then I've been meaning to tell you. I'm with Jake. Didn't want to upset you." In my previous life, Mia had done the same, boldly claiming her territory. Mia was vibrant and rebellious. While others prepared for exams, she partied. Not the typical good girl, but her rebellious nature was somehow irresistibly attractive to those who followed the rules. Jake was clearly one of them. Thinking back to the final moments of my past life, my hand burned from cigarette burns, clutched Jake's white shirt sleeve, begging him to spare me. "No matter how much you hate me, you didn't have to go this far." Jake looked at me, his thin lips curling slightly. "What other way? If it weren't for you, Mia wouldn't have married someone else and died during childbirth. Why should you live well when she died, Karina? It's not fair." "Yes, because of my snitching in the past life," I replied, lowering my gaze. "Well, I wish you both a lifetime of happiness." Mia gave me a surprised look, but remained silent. Days passed, and Jake and Mia dated secretly like any young couple, skipping classes to watch movies, sharing tattoos near their hearts, kissing on romantic Ferris wheels, and racing motorcycles in the midnight streets. They forgot they were still students while I watched silently, focusing on my university entrance preparations. In my past life, because of Jake, I had chosen the same high school to become an art student, always chasing his shadow, trying to bask in his light. Now, I plan to switch to a regular student, retake the entrance exams, and carve my own path. It would be tough, but I was determined to try, until I overheard Mia boasting at school that Jake was just a piano nerd. "He knows nothing without all his competitions and fame. Who'd want to be with him?" Classmates murmured. "Yeah, right." "Yeah, right? You just play around with him, huh?" Mia confidently stated. "Don't doubt it. I say east, he doesn't dare go west. There's a piano competition soon. Can you make him bail?" "Piece of cake. Just watch," she replied. I sat nearby, knowing the competition winner would secure a spot at a renowned music school abroad. I understood how much it meant to him. Naturally, without my intervention, the critical moments of my past life would replay. Last time, I knew Mia's intentions were malicious. She tried hinting to Jake, but he thought I was causing trouble. After hesitating, I alerted his parents, which they perceived as me causing trouble. Their intervention caused chaos, forcing Jake and Mia to break up. Eventually, Jake missed the top spot due to his deteriorated condition, but he still received an opportunity to study overseas. However, he held a grudge against me for years, even ruining Mia's payback. Realizing this, Mia faced me, winking. "Karina, you won't snitch, right?" I lowered my head, opening my book. Of course not. In this life, I chose to remain silent, respecting others' destinies. Until I saw Jake outside my house, the first encounter since my rebirth. With memories of his actions toward me, I suppressed my disgust. Looking down, scattered broken beer bottles were strewn around. His hands were slightly bleeding. Upon seeing me, he sprang up, red-eyed, clutching me. "Karina, you're close with Mia, right? Can you reach her for me? She says we're done, but I can't live without her. She thinks the piano's boring. I'll quit. She's way more important. Help me, please. I'm out of options. I love her, and I'd give up anything for her." I looked at the disheveled boy in front of me. He no longer possessed the aura he once had. His long, pale hands were cut by a beer bottle, and he didn't seem to care. But in my memory, he had treasured those hands. He used to say he thanked the heavens for giving him hands that could play beautiful music, enjoying the rhythm of his fingers dancing across the piano keys. A pianist's hands are their most valuable asset, yet right now, in his eyes, they seemed insignificant compared to Mia. He wasn't the same person I admired before. It seemed loved ones only existed in memories. I paused for a moment and took out my phone to call Mia. "Mia, Jake is drunk at my place. Can you come over?" He stood beside me carefully, looking at the phone expectantly. Mia seemed to snicker on the other end. Then she said, "Can you ask him if he'd really do anything for me?" I had the speakerphone on, so Jake heard it too. He hurriedly replied, "Of course I would." Then Mia said, "Don't participate in the competition," before hanging up, leaving Jake stunned. I looked at Jake, curious to see what choice he'd make without my interference. Dreams or love? What would he choose? Jake hung his head and, after a while, chuckled bitterly. "Do I really have to give up the competition to prove how important she is to me?" He wasn't asking me, but I knew his answer. I didn't say much, just watched him leave despondently. Jake didn't attend the piano competition because his hands were injured. Amazingly, he and Mia reunited. I saw them sweetly holding hands as they walked home from school, the light in Jake's eyes shining again as he gazed lovingly at Mia beside him in the alley on their way home. Mia held a cigarette in her left hand, blowing smoke into his face. Jake affectionately ruffled her hair and kissed the corner of her mouth before putting his arm around her waist and walking into a nearby pool hall, laughing and joking with a group of young punks. I sighed, turning away to play the role of a complete bystander. It wasn't until Jake's mom discovered our class that things escalated. Jake's mother, Linda, was a teacher, always proper and serious in my eyes. She used to lovingly help me with my homework, praising me as a smart kid. Jake's family was modest. His dad worked at a small company, and his mom was a high school teacher. They had always placed high hopes on Jake. When she learned Jake loved the piano, Linda didn't hesitate to use her savings to buy him an expensive piano. Jake didn't disappoint, winning countless awards, big and small. As long as he graduated from high school, he'd receive an offer from a prestigious music school abroad. This competition was supposed to be his stepping stone, but Jake squandered his chances. Standing before our class, Linda's face twisted with anger as she slapped Mia, leaving 5 red marks on her glamorous cheek. Mia stared back in disbelief and shouted, "What right do you have to hit me?" Linda sneered. "What right? Just because you, at such a young age, led my son astray. Do you know how much effort I've put into getting him this far? And you dare lure him into giving up the piano competition for you?" Linda didn't work at our school, so while Jake and Mia dated openly, even the teachers knew about it. But since Jake had such a promising future, after his college entrance exams, he could easily get into prestigious schools abroad. So, apart from shaking their heads and sighing about what a good guy he was with someone like Mia, the teachers didn't interfere much. Mia, now white-faced, insisted, "Lure him. Linda, your son begged me to be with him. I didn't force him at knife point to quit the competition. It was his choice." Linda, her eyes flashing with rage, reached to pull Mia's hair. A curious onlooker had already left the classroom, and soon Jake got wind of it and rushed over. He pushed his mother away, standing protectively in front of Mia. "Mom, you're nuts. Hit me if you want. The decision to quit was mine. It had nothing to do with her." Linda probably didn't expect her usually obedient and sensible son to contradict her for a girl. Furious, she was shaking, on the brink of collapse. She slapped Jake too, then suddenly pointed to me amid the crowd and demanded, "Why her? Even if it were someone like Karina, I'd forcibly accept. Are you trying to kill me?" Caught off guard, I stood frozen. This hadn't happened in another life. Linda never came to the school afterward, even when she found out they were dating. They handled it more discreetly then, but not this time. She was making a scene, embarrassing them both. As Linda called me out, everyone turned their eyes toward me. Mia, as if realizing something, suddenly glared at me. "Karina, did you rat us out?" "How could you? I thought you were my best friend." Jake also looked at me, lips tight, but his gaze was frightening. I was about to burst. I hadn't done anything, yet everything was pinned on me. I shrugged. "It's not me. I didn't say anything, and I don't want to be involved in your issues. If you're going to argue, take it outside and don't disturb others who are studying. Also, Aunt Linda, please clarify that this isn't my doing." Mia, however, was convinced I was the snitch. Jake's teacher soon arrived, pulling Linda back and urging her to calm down. Linda finally reined in her temper. "If your teachers hadn't informed me, I wouldn't even know what you've been up to behind my back." Linda and the teacher were classmates, so the news came from the teacher. That cleared my name. This scandal had grown, and the whole school knew about it. Early romances weren't uncommon, and some parents did make a scene at school, often ending with the couple splitting up or one transferring. Mia was an art student with some academic neglect, believing she could easily get into a school with her looks. She wouldn't transfer for Jake. She felt wronged. Jake too felt guilty for dragging Mia down, letting her be humiliated by his mom. After Linda took him home, he went as far as going on a hunger strike, even smashing his beloved piano and clashing with his parents to the end. I saw Jake after half a month, and that day was the first in 2 months I heard the piano. Since being with Mia, he rarely played, but it stopped abruptly. In the middle of the night, an ambulance arrived at their house. My parents heard it, threw on some coats, and rushed outside to help. It turned out Jake's parents were carrying him out. His right hand was covered in blood, soaking through his white shirt. I looked at his pale, weak face, and he had a smug smile. As he passed by me, he said, "I want to live my life for Mia. Don't get in my way, Karina, or you know the consequences." I stood there frozen, like I was paralyzed. Jake's fingers were broken. Even though they found out early, they couldn't be restored to their original condition. His parents finally agreed to let him and Mia be together. Jake couldn't play piano anymore. He didn't care, though. He just said it was proof of his love for Mia, a mark of his youth. But I knew those hands could play the most beautiful music. He could have been performing in big concerts, with everyone admiring him. Now they were officially together. I heard they broke up several times. Mia started making demands for expensive gifts no student could afford once she was acknowledged as Jake's fiancée. His parents hated her like she was the enemy and cut off his allowance. They rented a place outside of school, living off the prize money Jake had won over the years. They managed okay for a while. I didn't care about any of it. Kept my head down, grinding through test papers. It was exhausting, but I submitted a satisfying college entrance exam in the end. Jake didn't do well on his exams. Due to his injury, he had no choice but to take the regular college route, as his hand injury ended any chance of a piano career. After exams, our class had a farewell party. Mia brought Jake along. She wore an expensive Chanel-style suit, with wavy hair, looking mature for our age. Jake had dyed his hair silver because Mia liked it. The teacher left early, leaving just us classmates. People who didn't dare to confess their feelings did so as if it was a confession party. One girl nudged me upon seeing Mia, muttering, "Don't know why she's so smug, looking like a hooker. All those brands can't hide the trashy vibes." Mia's high-profile presence wasn't well-liked by the high achievers. Of course, Mia heard it, and she looked over coldly. "Oh, wow, who's this? An ugly nobody daring to gossip. So pathetic you don't even have a man. I'm not like some two-faced backstabber." Mia threw a challenging look at me. After the last incident, she'd held a grudge, even though I explained it wasn't me who snitched. Their relationship was so public that hiding it was impossible. My friend noticed Mia targeting me and shot her a glare, scoffing, "You may value Jake, but no one else does. Besides, he can't even play piano now." Jake looked embarrassed overhearing this. Mia, however, clung to his arm and chimed in, "Who cares? He's handsome and can make bank in entertainment. You nerds can't compete." She turned to Jake and said, "Kiss me." Jake sighed, "Not now. So many people." Mia retorted, "Why? You're cool with it usually, but Karina's presence bothers you now?" Jake glanced at me, seemingly flustered and ready to explain. I cut in, "Mia, this is a class reunion, not your personal love nest. Don't involve me." I tried to leave, but Mia stopped me, taunting, "Don't act like I don't know about the love letters you hid under your desk. Pretend all you want, you like Jake too." It turns out Mia knew about my crush on Jake for a while. Doesn't it sting when friends snag who you like? I realized, but in this life, I wasn't as impulsive. It's normal to have a teenage crush, and I never let it interfere with anyone's life, or mine. I wasn't ashamed. "I don't see Jake as a gem, Mia," I said plainly. Jake seemed surprised, thrown off by my words. But I was done engaging and walked out of the KTV. The night air cleared my head as I waited for a cab. Then I heard footsteps behind me. It was Jake. "Don't mind Mia, she's blunt but doesn't mean it." I stood still at the curb. Our shadows were cast on the dimly lit street. I asked, "Are you happy with Mia?" He seemed puzzled. I asked again, "Are you?" He exhaled sharply. "You've come back too?" "Yeah," I replied. From the moment Jake's fingers were injured, I knew he was reborn. Now both of us had memories from our past lives. Before, I alone carried those memories. I could bury that hatred inside. But now, with Jake also remembering, I said, "Relax, I won't meddle this time. If I knew how much you hated me back then, I'd never have acted. But it's pointless now." I turned to look at him. Not the image I recalled, nor resembling his successful past self. "Sorry for what happened before, but Mia's innocent. Don't resent her." He began, "In this life, you chose the life you wanted with Mia, but ended up like this. Do you regret it?" I hesitated, replying not with words, but I already knew the answer. "Everything's been reset. I won't dig up old events. You and Mia are none of my concern." "Goodbye," I said, or rather, "see you never." I thought Jake really felt guilty for what he did to me in the past life, but it turned out he was just worried I'd get back at Mia. He thought too highly of himself. Watching him hit rock bottom, stuck in the mud forever, was way more satisfying than any revenge. Mia chased us outside from the KTV, seeing us talking by the street. She shrieked, rushed over, and slapped Jake right across the face. "Good job, Jake," she screamed. "You sneak around with this little tramp behind my back. What, tired of seeing me? I've given you so much, and this is how you repay me? Where's your conscience? I got kicked out of art school for you. I can't be a star now. Do you even care about me and the baby I'm carrying?" Mia was pregnant. I glanced at the two of them, surprised. Just then, a cab pulled up. I quickly jumped in, afraid that if I waited any longer, something might happen to Mia and Jake would come after me for it. I later heard from classmates that Mia discovered she was pregnant during a checkup. She wanted to terminate it, but Jake insisted she keep it. Figures in the past life, Mia had complications from an abortion at a sketchy clinic and died. Just like a tragic story you'd read about teenage angst. There was no way Jake would let history repeat itself this time, but none of it concerned me. After the college entrance exam results came out, Jake's scores were only good enough for a low-tier college. No surprise about Mia, she didn't even pass the health exam for art school. My scores weren't stellar either, but at least I got into a well-known university, headed to the school of my dreams. I could finally put some distance between us. To celebrate me coming to my senses and getting into a good school, my parents threw a big party, inviting friends and family. Since Jake's family lived next door, they were invited too. Of course, Jake didn't show up. My usually quiet dad got a bit tipsy, his face red as he toasted everyone. When he reached Jake's parents, he couldn't help but say, "Jake, what a shame. I watched you grow up. I always told Karina to work hard like her brother Jake." Linda's eyes welled up. looking really awkward as she forced a smile. Who wouldn't agree? Young people today, what can you do? I wish you were as smart and mature as Karina, she said. My mom quickly tugged at Dad's sleeve, reminding him to be careful with his words, not to pour salt in the wound. My dad let out an awkward laugh. Don't worry, Jake's a genius. Even if he doesn't pursue piano, he could do well in regular college. But without my meddling in this lifetime, Jake had a fallout with his parents and didn't go to study abroad. After injuring his hand, he chose to leave piano behind, deciding instead to be with his first love. He didn't go to college but took on his responsibilities as a man, taking care of Mia and their baby. During my university years, I'd occasionally hear updates about them through classmates. Word was they had a wedding. Though they didn't officially marry since they weren't of age, Jake got a job at a piano training class, teaching kids, which wasn't hard with his background. The pay was just enough to support himself. I heard their life was simple but happy. Eventually, I got caught up in my studies and stopped checking the high school group chat. After graduation, knowing a bit about future trends from my past life, I joined a reputable company. Within 3 years, I climbed the ranks, becoming an admired supervisor with $1 million salary. My parents worried about me not being married, saying I was getting older and should find someone. I always brushed them off. Finally, my dad asked, Karina, are you still thinking about Jake? I paused, surprised. I hadn't heard Jake's name in forever. He didn't enter the entertainment world this time around, didn't become a famous musician. He quietly faded from the limelight. I collected my thoughts, chuckling, Dad, what are you talking about? Just wondering, I heard Jake's in LA, running a small business and doing pretty well. With the memories of the past, I knew that, whichever way, Jake wouldn't have a terrible life this time. Isn't he married? I added. How he's doing has nothing to do with me. Right, his stuff. Anyway, your mom's calling me for dinner. Take care of yourself out there, okay? My dad rushed off the phone, leaving me deep in thought. Then, unexpectedly, I bumped into Jake. It happened at a small boutique restaurant with a unique vibe, introduced by a friend as a date spot with a guy named Leo. I'd met Leo a few times. He was smart and promising. He seemed really interested in me, so I agreed to meet him again. He was early, and as I sat down, he asked, Cold outside? Want something to drink? My friend owns this place. Their coffee's really good. I replied, Anything's fine. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on a corner with a piano. I froze, memories flooding back like a wave. I instinctively walked over. In one corner of the piano, there was a spot where the finish was chipped, covered with a cartoon sticker. It had yellowed over time, but was still firmly stuck on, showing it had been well cared for. Memories rushed in. When I was 12, both my parents were working late. The power was out in nearby neighborhoods due to electrical work. Terrified, I sat by the window with a flashlight, thinking of all the scary movies I'd seen with friends, and cried. Suddenly, someone tapped on the window, startling me into a scream. A gentle voice followed. Don't cry, I'm Jake from next door. Heard you crying, scared of the dark. Had dinner yet? My mom made some. There's plenty. When I didn't reply, he didn't push. A while later, a lunchbox was pushed in through the window. If you're still scared, I can play piano for you. That night, the power never came back on. Jake played song after song from next door, keeping me company through the long night. That piano was Jake's. The sticker, from when I got to know him better, I'd accidentally scratched the finish off when I visited. I was scared at the time. Even as a kid, I knew pianos were expensive, and my parents would kill me if they found out. But Jake just ruffled my hair and said, It's okay, no big deal. Back then, we put on that cartoon sticker together. It turns out, you shouldn't meet someone too stunning when you're young. My thoughts came back. Leo noticed my interest in the piano. He couldn't help but ask, Do you play the piano too? I shook my head, pressed a few keys, and chuckled. I don't, but someone I knew used to. They played really well. Leo grinned at me. Well, that's a coincidence. My friend plays too, but he injured his hand. I used to joke that if he hadn't, he could have been a piano master. I was stunned. Your friend? Yeah, he's the owner of this place. Following Leo's gaze, I instinctively turned around. There stood a man in a black shirt with a slight beard on his handsome face, wearing an apron. Jake looked much older, not youthful at all, more like someone beaten by life into middle age. He didn't seem to recognize me. He walked over with a slight limp, and I noticed he had a prosthetic leg. He naturally greeted my friend, Leo. Your girlfriend? She's pretty. Why haven't you brought her around before? Leo gave an awkward smile. Don't say that, Karina hasn't accepted my advances yet. He seemed frozen for a minute before his eyes finally landed on my face as if confirming something. Finally, he spoke. Karina, Jake. Long time no see. I nodded slightly, laughing a bit. You've changed a lot, Jake. I almost didn't recognize you. Jake seemed to be searching his memory for my old image. I said casually, well, I'm not the same as I was in school. Leo glanced between us. You two know each other? What a coincidence. Yeah, quite a coincidence. Almost weirdly so. Leo excused himself to the bathroom, leaving us alone. Jake finally spoke up. How have you been all these years? As you can see, not bad, I replied. Jake nodded, glancing towards where Leo had gone. Leo's a good guy. Genuine, hardworking, comes from a good family. He's a good match. I snorted, not responding. We didn't really have anything to say. Do you still play piano? I suddenly asked. Surprised, he looked up, then let out a bitter laugh. I play occasionally, but my hand's injured. There's no way I can play like I did at 15. What about Mia? She should be in elementary school by now, right? He was silent for a while. We got divorced. He then started talking about his experiences over the years. He didn't take the college entrance exam back then. After blowing through the prize money from various competitions, they fell into hard times. Mia wanted the best of everything, hospitals, a mountain of supplements, but having a baby is no small task. It's expensive. After the child was born, Mia insisted on hiring a nanny. But by then, they were broke. Mia's parents had already cut her off, so there was no way they could help. Jake had to support his family while also caring for Mia and the child. He thought about asking his parents for help, but maybe it was pride, or maybe it was because of memories from a past life. He thought earning money wouldn't be hard if he was willing. He copied several hit songs from his past life and submitted them to production companies. But with no connections, he was rejected. Once he even got accused of plagiarism for a song that hadn't been released yet. Jake was sued and had to pay a large amount. His parents reached out, saying they would help if he broke up with Mia. Jake refused and borrowed from loan sharks. Unable to repay, he ended up getting his leg broken by debt collectors. Life was tough during that period, yet Mia didn't understand. She'd call him useless, saying even male models made more money. Their conflicts over money and baby formula escalated, and what little beauty from their youth eroded under the pressures of everyday life. Mia would dress up and leave, coming back drunk every day. Jake lay in bed exhaustively caring for the crying baby. The fights grew worse. Eventually, when the kid was 4 months old, Mia left one day and never returned. Jake took the child back home. After being down for a couple of years, he bounced back, starting small stalls, doing anything he could. The hands that once played piano now were calloused and rough. Slowly, he saved up enough to open this coffee shop. Hearing all this, I couldn't help but feel a bit wistful, but that was all it was. Leo returned, ending our conversation. As we were leaving, Jake couldn't help but call after me, "Do you still hate me?" I turned to look at him. Hate? Hate you for what? For sending me into investors' offices, for not helping when I was down? He gave a bitter smile. In our last life, I was too extreme, too arrogant. I blamed you for Mia's death. I'm sorry. The apology was 8 years too late. But I didn't need it now. I was just curious about one thing. He asked, what? In this life, you chose the life you wanted with Mia, but ended up like this. Do you regret it? He hesitated, replying not with words, but I already knew the answer. During the new year, I went back to my hometown to help my parents move. I got them a big place in the city center and got my dad a new car. While moving, I ran into Jake's parents. Inside their house, arguments echoed. Dishes crashed to the floor. I curiously asked my parents, "Do they argue often?" My mom was ready for some gossip. "You haven't been back these years, did you know? Jake had a kid with a woman, a son. The woman ran off. I think she was your high school classmate, right? She couldn't stand Jake being crippled and not making money, so she ran off with a rich guy. Just last month, she suddenly came back, all dressed up fancy. Guess what she came back for?" I frowned. "To see the kid?" "Exactly. She wanted to take him, but Jake's parents wouldn't allow it. Then she dropped a bombshell, saying the kid's not even Jake's. She had him with some other man, spent all these years living with the child's real father. Seems like he's well off now but can't have kids, so she wants to take him back. I was stunned. I didn't expect that. I always thought they were true love. My dad chimed in from the side. Jake came back too, went to the hospital for a paternity test, and found out the kid wasn't his. You wouldn't believe how crazy it got that day. You didn't see Jake's eyes. They looked like he was out for blood. He just kept going on about how much he'd given up for her, saying if it weren't for Mia, he could have been a world-renowned pianist, that his bright future was ruined. Then this happened to him. He was crying and laughing all over the place, and he even got violent. The woman got stabbed a few times, but luckily nothing life-threatening. But Jake ended up in jail too. His parents wanted to settle things privately, but the other side wasn't having it. They insisted Jake go to prison, and in the end, they had to give the kid back to the woman. Still, they sold their house and paid a big sum. After hearing all that, it just hit me how unpredictable life is. When the moving company arrived, the alley was already blocked with boxes. I spotted Jake smoking at the door. I pretended not to see and turned to leave, but he suddenly grabbed my hand. Karina, I regret it. It turns out the life I wanted is so miserable. Now I realize how much you helped me in my past life, and yet I treated you that way. I keep replaying the past in my head every day, and I really regret it. I really regret treating you like that. If the past events hadn't happened, if Mia had died, if the one with me was you, would I have been happy? This life? Why didn't you stop me? Didn't you always like me? Jake looked at me with pleading eyes. I mercilessly shook off his hand. Get a grip, Jake. Let me say it again. This is the life you wanted. No matter what you choose, someone like you won't find happiness. I did like you, but I liked that warm-hearted boy who played piano for me over and over during dark nights, not the Jake you are now. He finally retracted his hand in defeat. I left the alley without looking back, feeling the heaviness in my chest finally lift. The past is just like smoke. Jake committed suicide on New Year's Eve. His parents' cries were agonizingly loud. He left a note. It only had one sentence. If only I could start over. I don't know if Jake will be reborn again, but I know this. Someone as selfish as him, no matter how many chances he gets, won't have a perfect life. Life is supposed to be full of regrets. He blamed everyone else for his mistakes. People like that will never find happiness.